Hi everyone, I'm Natalie, I work at Animal Think Tank, and Rob, if anyone was here for Rob's talk, that was really looking at a lot of the public research, kind of public opinion research we're doing, and also another big piece of the research we're doing at Animal Think Tank is looking at other successful social movements and what we can learn from them. So here today to talk about why at Animal Think Tank we think having a narrative strategy is really key for us as a movement for winning animal freedom. So they said racial segregation will never end in America. They said abortion will never be legalized in Ireland. They said you'll never see gay marriage in your lifetime. And they said animal freedom will never be a reality. So no matter the time, no matter the place, no matter the cause, social justice campaigners have always been told that what we're pushing for is impossible. And we believe that the role of narrative strategy is really about changing the narrative landscape. So really identifying what are the dominant harmful narratives, what are helpful narratives that can really help shift people's mindsets, and how we can crowd those out and overshadow harmful narratives over time. And most of all, it's about unity. That is key to narrative strategy, is having a unified strategy as a movement. And it's really about shifting people's mindsets into having more helpful attitudes and how over time this actually helps shift people's worldviews, their views about how the world works and their place in it. So we've done a lot of public research and through both quantitative research, so large-scale surveys, and through interviews and focus groups, we've really identified 4 key barriers to people connecting with the issue of animal freedom. And through social movement research as well, we've also found that these are the 4 dominant narratives for whatever social justice cause you're focusing on. So the first barrier for people is this mindset of individualism, so this idea of personal interest. And when people are in that mindset, it blocks their empathy. The second mindset, the biggest barrier, is this idea of an us versus them. So this idea that there is a other and that they are inferior. Another mindset is when people feel threatened, so they might feel guilty, they might feel at risk. That really is a barrier for people connecting with the issue. And lastly, the biggest barrier, so even if people agree with your issue, believe that change is desirable, the biggest barrier for them is that change is impossible, so it's this idea of futility. Fortunately, through doing social movement research, especially on successful social movements, there are ways to overcome these barriers. So from shifting people from an individualism mindset, research shows that speaking to shared interests can really move people. So it's this idea of communicating the shared values and aspirations of a society. So it's about elevating what we share in common. And this really helps people consider the interests of others. And to move people from that really harmful mindset of there being an us versus a them, it's about creating this sense of a bigger us. So it's about speaking to really core fundamental values like dignity, like similarity and connection, really breaking down that us and them. So framing those who are most affected by an issue with dignity and agency, rather than passive victims, research shows really helps evoke empathy rather than pity. And really elevating in our communication similarities and sharing stories of connections helps create that sense of a bigger us. And to move people from that mindset of threat, where they might feel guilty or they might feel at risk, it's about speaking to the opportunity of the issue. So it's really about communicating that change is desirable. So it's about celebrating what we want more than just criticizing what we're against as a movement. And this really helps avoid making people feel guilty or triggering a sense of loss aversion, which again, just gets people in that kind of individualism mindset. And it's about showing this is about creating something better. This isn't just about ending harm. And most importantly, it's about framing this as a win-win for everyone. This isn't just a win for animals, this is a win for all of society. And to move people from the mindset of futility, it's really about communicating a sense of hope. So it's showing that change is possible. And that's obviously communicating like solutions of what will work, solutions that are already out there, alternatives that are already out there, and future ones, and showing how society will look, the bold kind of vision that we're aiming for, makes change seem both desirable and possible. So through our social movement research, we've really found there are some key ingredients for a winning narrative strategy from those movements. So firstly, those movements inspired people with hope and possibility. They really connected with people around shared values and aspirations. They really framed the problem as a violation of those values. They created empathy about those who were affected rather than pity. They used the trusted messengers to help others relate to this issue, and they used a variety of messengers for different groups of people. And they found the persuasive narratives that could really shift people's attitudes and their beliefs, that really shifted people's mindsets about an issue. And most of all, they used unity. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. So unity is, as a movement, unity around what we're communicating about the issue. It's about how we're communicating it, the trusted messengers that we're using, how we're framing it. It's about who we're communicating to, like understanding who are the audiences, what are their values, what are their aspirations, and that's different across segments. And it's about where we're communicating as well, the avenues that we're using, who we're connecting with, and that really is a whole webinar in its own right, but that is a big part of narrative strategy as well. So I'm going to speak a little bit about communicating the problem. So as a movement, and I think this is true for all social movements, we're very good at signposting the problem of the issue. And I think for a lot of communicators in the movement, that is really in the foreground of our communications. So for people who really care about an issue, communicating the problem is obviously key. That's what changed me. And it's about, it can help create a sense of moral outrage about the issue. And it can also help create a sense of urgency. And this is really important for helping people, encouraging people to take action. But we have to remember that for people who are perhaps more ambivalent about an issue, they already feel like they have enough problems to contend with in their own life, and that they don't want to be confronted with more problems. So research shows that for those who are ambivalent about an issue, if they're really just being confronted with the problem, this can really get them into that mindset of guilt and risk, which actually makes them shut down about an issue, so they won't even engage with it. Or if they're being exposed to a lot of different messages that really, again, just communicate the problem, they feel a sense of overwhelm. And that, of course, can move people to a sense of futility. They can't understand that change is possible, so they're not even going to engage with this issue. So obviously, communicating the problem is important. But I think as a movement, from looking at other social movements, the ways they approach their narrative strategy was really about foregrounding the opportunity of this issue. So research shows that persuasive communications, the problem should never be more than about 25% of our communications. We really connect with people through talking to shared values and shared aspirations. That's what really opens people up to engaging with an issue, and I'll be talking more about that in a moment. And of course, it's speaking to the solutions and speaking to the vision that really helps communicate that this change is both desirable and it is possible. So in essence, it's about communicating what we stand for as a movement, not just what we're against. So it could be sharing stories that really inspire hope in people and make animal freedom seem desirable. So stories such as animal communities being reintroduced or their homelands being protected, stories about the unique bonds between humans and other animals, stories of communities, humans coming together to the aid of animals, and stories of animals thriving even despite trauma in their lives. These can all inspire hope in people and show them that animal freedom is desirable. So I'm going to look now at the narrative strategy of successful movements, and this is something that really inspires us at Animal Think Tank. So I'm going to be looking at the Together for Yes campaign, which was the campaign to legalise abortion in Ireland. I'm going to be looking at the civil rights movement in America, and looking at the Freedom to Marry campaign in the US, which was to legalise gay marriage. So the civil rights movement's narrative strategy was really about storytelling in action. So every action they did, they really communicated this sense of a bigger us. And you can see this in this picture. It was an image of, African Americans, of white Americans, young, old, women, men, and standing together in solidarity, really communicating a sense of a bigger us. This wasn't an issue just about African Americans. This was an issue for America. And through campaigns like the Freedom Riders, they've really communicated core values that resonated with people. It's this idea of equality, of freedom, and of unity. And thinking about how you frame those who are most affected, they framed African Americans with dignity, and they really spoke to the similarity. And I think the most iconic piece of communication with the civil rights movement is the speech, "I Have a Dream." And Martin Luther King really laid out this compelling vision and showing that change was desirable. And he spoke to this idea that, one day children would be judged by the content of their characters, not by the color of their skin. And it's interesting, when you read that entire speech, he does talk about the problem, the nightmare of the reality, but what really inspired people was the dream. And even decades later, that is what people remember. It's the dream, not the problem. So how can we apply these lessons from the civil rights movement to the animal freedom movement? I think one of the big takeaways is this idea of animal dignity and connection. So not just framing animals as victims, but showing they have agency. So whether that's stories of them resisting their oppression, showing them growing old in sanctuaries, that idea of connection. My octopus teacher was great at that, really framing animals as our mentors and as our guides. And this image in the bottom right corner is a tiger who was a really celebrated member of a community in an Indian village, and she was given this really elaborate funeral when she died. So it's really communicating stories like that that can really help change a narrative about animals. And then another big takeaway is this idea of juxtaposing the nightmare versus the dream. So for anyone that was in Rob's talk just previously, we've done public research testing on this, and we found that messages that show just the problem or just the kind of solution are not as effective as messages that show the two together. That is much more powerful and persuasive, and it really speaks to a narrative in its own right. So I'm now going to be talking about the Together for Yeses campaign's narrative strategy, and that was the campaign to legalise abortion in Ireland. And they really looked at shared values and aspirations that was core to their narrative strategy. And Together for Yes are a big inspiration for us because they spent a lot of time doing public opinion research and message testing to understand what were people's barriers to this issue, what were the things that they could leverage to really understand. And they found this movement, obviously, to legalise abortion, it is framed with that narrative of choice. And they found through doing focus groups that actually people understand choice as an individual decision. And they also understand it as quite a frivolous decision. So that didn't really help people connect with this issue of legalising abortion in Ireland. So they realised through doing that research that they actually needed to pivot how they communicated this issue. So they found that they needed to speak to aspirational values, so both individual values and societal values of care and of compassion. And they shared stories about Ireland changing in the past because it was a caring and compassionate nation. And this is what really helped people connect with this issue and move them. And this is obviously a very religious Catholic country, and for a really long time people weren't being persuaded on this issue. And through pivoting, I'm sure everyone knows Together for Yes was successful, and this was key to it, was the shared values and the aspirations. So previously this movement, you'd see this kind of image like my body, my choice, and kind of women, just individual women in the frame. What Together for Yes did was really root this in societal values. This wasn't about individual choice. This was something that affected all of society. And what they did, if you look at any of their messages, they put people in the frame. This wasn't just something that affected individual women. Like, as these communicate, this affects Ireland. So every piece of communication, it was communicating that idea of a bigger us, essentially, but this does affect everyone, and it's people coming together to show support and voting yes, and it was very aspirational, and it worked. And they use messages like this, that sometimes a private matter needs public support. So it really spoke to that idea that previously people had thought this is just an individual choice, this isn't something for Ireland to interfere with, but really spoke to, if you believe care and compassion and change, you should vote yes. So it was really communicating this is an issue that affects everyone. It doesn't just affect women. And again, they showed that through their communications, like this message, "She lives on your street," is about creating a sense of relatability and connection with those who were affected by the issue, but also showing that actually it affected everyone, because these women, they're your neighbor, they're your sister, they're your wife, they're your mother, they're your friend. This is an issue that affects all of Ireland. And I think one of the big takeaways for us as a movement is thinking, how can we frame this issue not about individual choice, which obviously keeps people in that mindset of individualism, but how can we communicate that this is about societal values and that change is both desirable and possible? So I'm going to be talking about freedom to marry now, which again is a huge inspiration for us at Animal Think Tank. We're consulting regularly with the people that were involved in this to really understand the research they went through. And like Together for Yes, they spent a lot of time doing qualitative research, like understanding what were people's barriers to this issue, because for decades people were just not moving on this issue. They did not support the idea of gay marriage. So they did both public opinion research and message testing. And like Together for Yes, they found that their own communications were a hindrance to people really connecting with this issue. So they've been using quite abstract terms like rights and justice. And they realized through doing focus groups and stuff, when people think about marriage, they do not think about rights and justice. They think about love and a commitment. So they moved to those shared values of family, of love and equality and freedom. And you can see that even in their logo. This really spoke to people. This really helped connect them to the issue in a way they hadn't previously. And again, they made it a societal issue. So previously, they had been talking about this was a campaign to legalise gay marriage. But they realised that actually framed this issue as something that just affected the gay community. So just this small language change of marriage equality opened up this issue. Equality is something that affects a society. So they really framed it as this is something that affects America. And it really made people understand this is something that you should be engaging with, you should be connecting with. So just small changes like that can really shift people's mindsets. And I think, a really big takeaway for us is this idea of how you frame each win. Every time they won a win in a US state, they framed it as love wins, as America wins, as you can see in the colour palette here, that everyone wins. This was never just a win for the gay community. They always framed it as a big win that everyone could celebrate in. And another key strategy for freedom to marry was their use of journey stories. So they use a lot of trusted messengers to help connect people to this issue. So they used people of faith discussing how they changed their minds without compromising their beliefs in supporting the freedom to marry. And that obviously really connected with people of faith and different kind of demographics. And they also, again, like Together for Yes, they expanded the frame. They didn't just share stories of gay couples talking about why they wanted the freedom to marry. They shared stories about parents talking about how they wanted their gay children to celebrate their love in the same way they did. And that really, through testing, they found that that was really, really persuasive for people. And again, they expanded the frame through relatable messengers to bring it back to that idea of family again. Everyday families of all generations, of all ethnicities, talking about why they wanted to support their family members to be able to marry the love of their life. So speaking to those values of family and of love. And they use a lot of unexpected messages as well to help shift people that were still resistant to this issue. So they use messages by police officers and firefighters on why they supported the freedom to marry for their gay colleagues. So this whole kind of variety of trusted messengers is really opening up this issue for many Americans. And journey stories, I think, are really powerful because they offer people the chance to think and act in new ways. And research shows that when people identify with the messenger, when they relate to the messenger or they respect the messenger, they're much more open to listening to that message. So journey stories are really powerful when you understand who your audience is and who their trusted messengers are. And as the founder of Freedom to Marry said, Evan Wilson, he said, we turn this from what do you think about gay people to what do you think about your own values? What do you think about America's values? And when you think back to the other social movements we've talked about today, like the civil rights movement, this was never about what do you think about African Americans? It was what do you think about your own values? What do you think about America's values? And the same with Together for Yes. It wasn't what do you think about women who are affected by abortion? It was what do you think about your own values? What do you think about Ireland's values? And that really helps people open up to a issue. So I think a big takeaway for us from Freedom to Marry is connecting with those shared values. And it's really about reframing this not as an animal issue. It's about reframing this as a values issue and making us question, what are our values? What are the UK's values? Whatever country we're working in. And it's really about remembering that messengers are just as important as the message. It's not just what we're communicating, it's how we're communicating, what messengers we're using. And we have a lot of journey stories on our movement already. I don't know if Alice is in the room, but Alex Lockwood, amazing film director, he's used this idea of journey stories a lot in his filmmaking. So 73 Cows was about a former farmer who brought his last herd of cows to sanctuary rather than slaughter. So really showing that shift, that journey for him. Test Subjects, I don't know if anyone's seen that, but really moving, really recommend it. And it was about people who used to work in vivisection and how they shifted their thinking and how they were now involved with campaigning for alternatives. And obviously Alice's story, who she used to work in the industry, is now essentially blowing the whistle. And really that The End of Medicine really showcases her journey and helps people connect with this issue in new ways. So a lot of the public research we're doing at Animal Think Tank is inspired by the social movement research that we've done. So we're thinking about what are the values and aspirations that can really help people connect with this issue in new ways. How can we frame this problem as a violation of those values that we all care about? What are the solutions that will really inspire people? And what is the vision that will really give people a sense of hope? And it's also about how we frame animals. So that idea of dignity, of similarity, like how can we do this that, again, helps people connect with this issue? How do we frame ourselves? How do we bring in our values and our aspirations to really open people up to this issue? How do we frame this sense of a bigger us, that this isn't just about animals and humans? How do we create a sense that actually, we're all animals, we're all kin, that this affects, what is happening affects all of us? And again, bringing it back to shared values and aspirations. And also trusted messengers. So as Rob mentioned in his talk earlier, we're about to do a large-scale study on segmentation. So it's really understanding who are the key segments of people who care about this issue or ambivalent about this issue. What do they care about? How can we connect with them? And who are their trusted messengers? And how can we reach them with messengers? And it's really about shifting that narrative landscape, or to use Matthew Glover's metaphor early, like raising the temperature, really changing how people understand this issue. So we've done a lot of research, and we found that the most persuasive narratives that really do help change people's mindsets is this idea of animal abilities. So this idea that animals have intelligence, they have awe-inspiring abilities, they have rich emotional inner lives. This was the most persuasive narrative we found so far. Social progress, so the idea that animal freedom is the next step in our journey as a society, that really resonated with people. And morality, the idea that this is the morally right thing for us to do. So again, bringing it back to values and aspirations. And all of these animal abilities, it speaks to this idea of dignity. Social progress speaks to this idea of change, and morality speaks to this idea of compassion. So all of these resonate across social movements, no matter the issue, no matter the country, no matter the time, the place, these endure. So it's not surprising for us that these are really persuasive narratives. So in summary, what helps social movements win? So it's about inspiring with hope and possibility. It's about connecting with the values and aspirations that matter most to your segment. It's about framing this as a problem of a violation of values. It's about creating empathy about those who are affected, not just pity. It's about using trusted messengers to help others relate to this issue in new ways. It's about finding persuasive narratives that really help shift people's mindsets, that help overcome more harmful beliefs and attitudes and move them towards more helpful beliefs and attitudes. So I think the reason why the civil rights movement, Together for Yes, Freedom to Marry, were all successful, and I think why other social movements are successful, is they answered the why of the issue through values. So why does this matter to me? Why should people care? Why is this relevant to me? They answer it with values, and it's through shared values and aspirations. And again, they make it a societal issue, and they frame it as a win for everyone. You see this across every social movement. It really is. This connects with people. And it really is about having a unified narrative strategy. So especially Together for Yes and Freedom to Marry, like behind the scenes, there was coalitions, there were groups coming together, they were collaborating, they had research consortiums. They really understood as a movement the power of having a unified narrative strategy, speaking to the same narratives, using similar trusted messengers, like that when people are kind of seeing this over and over again, it reinforces it in a way where if we're just working in our silos and it's more of a scattergun approach, so a unified narrative strategy is absolutely key. So this is really about shifting people from that mindset of animal freedom will never be a reality to the mindset that animal freedom is inevitable and it will benefit all of us. Thank you. So if you'd like to find out more about the work we're doing, you can find us on our website. We have a newsletter where you can sign up, so you'll get the latest information about the research that we're doing, webinars we're running. You can contact us. Please reach out to us via email if you'd like to collaborate, if you have ideas. We always love to hear from people. As Rob said in his previous talk, the next big study we're doing is a crowdsourced message study. So if you work for an organization, a grassroots group, if you have a message that you want us to test, get in touch, and we'll be doing a large-scale study, and we'll be able to share those results with everyone. And this QR code links you to our most recent messaging guide and also all of our reports. And we have another messaging guide coming out later this summer. So thanks, everyone.